having both heat and cold, having both wet and dry, and through heat and cold and wet and dry, all things can be created. Okay? This is the knowledge. So now, as we're seeing this and we're warming up into this, we now have so there is a link here. Oh, yeah, I guess this is important. I was like, I don't know if this is important. Yeah, it's very important. It's actually really important. So here's what happens then, because obviously some people are not feeling really godlike right now. Some may be feeling a little depressed. Why? Because remember when I told you, like, the bullies or the bullel only has an interest in either shutting down the whole changing component, raising Kundalini, reproduction, right? This is why you get Jesuit orders, because they serve bullel, okay? They pass papal bulls and decrees to make things shut down, to separate. You see what I mean? They create the separation. So because you know that, you have to realize what is happening on the astral plane, though, and that's actually put into an image in ancient Sumerian, and what it shows is a being known as the Mahusu. I know. The Mahusu, which actually where Moses gets his name from. Okay? Now we know Moses is also a savior, right? And we know savior is Thoth, and Thoth is none other than the human being as God, right? The God man, the son of God, if you may. And now you'll notice here that some of the bulls are riding on Mashushu. And what this means is this means that gods actually ride human beings in a variety of ways. This doesn't mean that this is negative. It doesn't mean that this is positive. It means that this is something that goes on. You'll see beings being ridden by gods, meaning that you will have other life forms from different spaces. Let me just get my stuff together over here. Let me close some windows down. You'll see other life forms from other spaces riding on human beings. Some people can call that possession. And remember, some people call that walk-ins. And not all of these are positive and not all of these are negative, but they do happen. And it's shown in Sumerian text that humans basically, or Mashushus, were being ridden around by the gods all the time, probably as a way for them to be able to get into this space. So it's like people become filled with the god. So this is a revelation that came to my awareness after realizing that these are more ancient or archaic forms of the caduceus, also known as, I believe it's the acroion, right? So every culture has this symbol, but the most ancient one is this one. And that being there, or one of the most ancient ones is this one, and that being there is called the Mashushu. And so after reading through this, I was able to gather very clearly that because this is a chimera, it is symbolic to the four elements of the human being. This is why it says that it has a lion-like forelimb. It has eagle. It has this snake. And even in other texts, it breaks it down identical to the four elements because it's a reference to the human being. And as it keeps going on, it starts to talk about this reddish snake or fierce snake, right? And as it keeps going on, it starts basically explaining that this fierce snake is the serpent of splendor, or basically this a healing and ruling serpent. And nothing else fits this description than Kundalini. as you keep reading through this, and then you realize that even the gods, if you're not taking it in a dualistic way only, the gods riding on Kundalini is even meaning to say that they have activated in certain ways Kundalini, and Kundalini is what you're riding on as a god. So what this is saying in so many words is that because you can't necessarily put yourself in the story, you are the story. You are every character in the story. So there's a part of you that basically rides on yourself like a dragon. So you ride Kundalini or you get eaten by it. There's only two ways to go with it. Okay? So we find here that this power and this presence has been throughout ages, showing that, yes, people revered the serpent and saw it as a symbol of healing, as Moses rose the Nehushtan in front of all the people to cure them from the poisonous snakes. Now, it's interesting here because it tells you, that's why I said before, to assume that all snakes are bad is just as silly as assuming that all humans are good. Because it's diverse. As in the Arabic text, it talks about the jinn and the zayrin, and it says that they have many of the traits and the ways of us, but in many ways they're different. In the books of Kim, it says that when a person dies, their soul or what rises from them is likened unto a serpent or a snake. And that many of the serpents that are still within the astral plane are that. Basically beings that have died and have yet to taken on a body. But it would, it sometimes doesn't make sense to many of us to understand that not only does the pineal gland calcify into a crystal, but so too that the spine of a human being is none other than a replica of the same spine through the serpent. But it is only the woman that we see at times that's able to move like that. Because the masculine part of us has more of that straight line. And have you ever seen somebody super masculine trying to dance? Versus someone super feminine, boy, like mesmerizing. Literally, mesmer. Hypnosis. Hips in hypnosis. Okay? Like you won't ever be able to make the truth up. It will just be. And you either accept it or you war with yourself, right? What we're at is we're reaching immortalis. This is 8th degree. We don't have any time to waste. Time for us is very valuable. It is as valuable as gold or the highest things in this space. And so we've decided to take this time to enlighten ourselves about who we are. So let me finish the correlations. Idris. And I stop with Idris because, man, it's another story for later, but I had a real experience with this being in the physical plane, this green one, in this rug that mom gave me. And it was a prayer rug, but it didn't have most of the stuff that normal prayer rugs have on it. Because, they put the temple and everything like that. It was just a prayer rug. And it was an outline. And when you looked at it, it looked like a person, but it was like the archway of a temple. Right? But it was the archway, as you looked at it, was the outline of something that either had wings or a cape. And through this process of consecration, and I was led back to this rug because it was one of the last things that remained in my closet as I was throwing everything that wasn't good for me away, like the Gucci shoes. Should have stuck with those Hermes. But as I was throwing everything away, this rug was left, and I was like, yeah, I need this rug, this prayer rug. And I will open this rug, and in the morning, the thing would come from the rug and explain all sorts of stuff. I kid you not. Like, I would tell you, I eventually threw the rug away. I know y'all like, man, are you serious? It got to a point where when I had finally got out of all of that occultation and all of the mysticism, I just was like, I just had this day. You know how you have those days and you're just like, man, let me throw all this stuff away. And the rug went right out with it, with all of its power. I had this thing and I said, you know what? If it's really true, it it will always be within. It doesn't have to be outside, because I did feel like that I was starting to gather relics. And since I had just come out of gathering a bunch of weight and things, I was like, let me just get rid of all of this stuff. And so anyway, I got rid of the rug. But I'm just saying that these accounts are real accounts. This green one is Hermes. This hermetic awareness or thought, it does come into the space. It is the word that does not come back void. It is Kundalini. It is real. And if you find yourself separated from it, it only means that you're separate from yourself. And the path, and this is why we're all on the path, is the journey back to self. This is what we're doing here. So I just want to make it very clear that I can't express to you enough in verbal. I have no reason to lie. I have way more wilder stuff that's happened beyond that there's no place to mention. My only goal here is to let you know from this and what you feel expressed from me that this stuff is very real. But I've seen a lot of fake stuff too. I've seen things that don't work. It's a lot of it. And I see why the process of unlocking this power is indeed a formula. It takes a different level of your own connection with self. Like it takes your own personal initiation, how you relate to the mysteries, your own experiences. And only thing that I'm here for is to confirm some things for you. So we have also Papa Legba ends up making the list. And finally, Hiram makes the list. All of those names have been completely researched to also be cognates of Mercury and Hermes. So now when you even see any of these stories, what you'll immediately see, even when you see, look at this, when you see Wooten sitting in that chair and the two dogs hunging and munging sitting next to him, that's the Caudatious staff once again, and Mercury is sitting in between. Okay, when you even see a practicing Orthodox Jew with the thing on the side, the bangs, I know you've wondered, like, what is that? That's the two twining serpents. And on the head is the phylactery, the square or the cube or the tetragrammaton. They're taking it that literal. And then they take the hand of the disagreeable and they bind that hand down. And you can't touch anything with any of the hands because those are the snakes. They take a little thing and they touch everything with that in order to not defile it because they work for Bullel. They're still asking Bullel. Do you see how this works? So it's a confusing thing for humans because they're like, well, shoot, man, what am I supposed to do? Should I go in this way or should I go that way? Because the original symbol of the caduceus staff was just a Y. It was a budding Y. It was a tree that went up with two branches with roses coming out of one branch. This is why Moses' metaphorical staff is the budding staff, because that's the good tree. And when he casts his staff down to the other two serpents, so this is two serpents on the side and one in the middle, it swallows up the other ones, meaning all of the yin yang forces, it makes one. So do you see, if you are just stuck watching Ben-Hur and you're Charlton Heston over here, and you get that interpretation, this is why I'm still in the matrix right now doing what I do, because that is not a way to explain to anyone the great mysteries. If anything, it's a way to mislead them. And because there's beings here that are seeming to mislead the beloved, now it's a showcase showdown. Now there is a return of the Djedi, or a return of the Djedi, or the return of the Messiah. Okay, that is a return of Kundalini. So what we're waiting on is not something that is going to come from the sky. We're waiting on the activation to take place within. And these kind of conversations, because this is not the normal stuff, is a sign. It's not just, oh, well, Sevan's the Messiah. James Evans Bomar, Jeb, the Lord of the earth, Jachin, Eva, Boaz, 3 times. I'm a third, thrice great. I've been to this space with people calling me the same name, identifying me the same way. But what does all that mean? It means what everybody else is too. If you feel so special about it, great, feel special. That's the only thing the story is for, is to, if you hear your name as I keep going down the list, and that's what it takes to feel special, it still leaves the great work before you. When you start hating everybody and you're not liking what's going on around you, you are giving up on the change. You see, we're midstream. Bill Gates works for Bullel. They're attempting to liquidate all of the souls as much as possible. And here are the last of the Jedi, for real, with the Caduceus staff. We're still trying to get it completely activated itself, which is basically trying to get humanity activated to realize who they are before they explode, versus figure out how to implode first. And this is the race to the top. And nobody will win because it will reboot itself. Meaning that Bullel won't win, Hermes won't win. It's not about who the winner is going to be. You got to center into this like, well, this is the module. This is the code. This is how this matrix works. You need to know as a magus how to manipulate and operate in the matrix. So that way you can plan your own course or your own path. I can't tell you what your course and your path is going to be. Behold, I saw the ladder going up and down. Even I myself have had to walk down the ladder, as we talked about avatars in the underworld. So just realize the level of power that you have. Now, just so we're covering this in order, so now you get why, again, that you have this ability, and this is what you call the dream, to be in between two worlds or oscillate into other worlds. This is another power that you have. And in this power, if you use it to your full potential, you could even conduct souls. Basically, even loved ones that passed on, you can take them through this door and put them into another space where things would be pleasant for them. You can lead them to another pasture. See, all of this metaphysical Messiah stuff is very real, but there have been few that have been able to unlock that power in this space. But that power is unlocked. So it means that in other spaces, like the astral plane, there are Jedis or Thoths or Hermes in the astral plane. That's why it's showing you. It's a psychopompus. It's what fills your mind when you feel like you become a genius, right? It's that genie in the bottle, right? The body is the bottle. The spirit inside is the genie. Right? And it brings knowledge and wisdom and awareness, a genius. Okay? So just understanding that the process of conducting souls is also one of the jobs on the astral plane if you are applying. The other thing is introducing departed souls to God, meaning that if you had the responsibility to say if a person's going to get another life or not, are you going to be a Bullel in them? Take them to the subjective plane to where they never get seen again. Put them in stasis. Freeze them. This is why they say Bullel is very similar to a cold god, right? The cold god is a god of ice. It freezes everything, so there's no time, okay? It is a frigid place, lifeless. They just mean, so when we describe this, is like, whoa, shit, it must be evil. For us as warm mammals, you see what I mean? It's like we're trying to hug up on something and get nurtured by something, and this thing is alone. This is even as a description. It says that God, if you may, or this supreme being is alone, not having anything likened unto itself, which is why it went into that creative process. So this is also that part of you that feels lonely at times. See, I don't want you to go out too far and start thinking about external gods. This Bulel that I'm talking about, that's the bully inside of you that doesn't change. You notice how hard it is to change? Sometimes you're still doing the same damn thing and you're like, man, I'm stuck. That's Bulel. So you got to know when that energy is applicable, because I think there's one song that goes, hold on to God's changing, unchanging hand. And they'll be singing this in church. And I'm like, what the hell is a changing, unchanging hand? And then I would look in the book to make sure that they were even saying it right. And sure enough, you know how they got that hymn book, God's unchanging, changing hand. Old Testament, that's Bulel, clearly. New Testament, that's Hermes. Old testicles, new testicles. This is the progeny or the genesis or the genealogies of the different variants of creation, right? So as we keep going, now we learn then that the metaphor then between Enki, which is the one who saves the humans as the Sumerian story goes, right? Enki is Cain. This is why if you move Enki around as words, you can spell Cain in Sumerian. Enki is the one that comes in and pleads on behalf of the human beings, etc., that, hey, don't destroy them. This is another savior. Now, Cain is a smith. So in this case, as we talked about, this smithing is not about just what the money changers are doing with the metal right now and the techno gods are doing with the elements right now, building machines and external things. The two hammers that Cain had were actually his two wives, but that's another story. You can just see a hammer as a pentagram. A pentagram is a symbol of not just a human being, but a human with a womb. Okay? So you can see woman to be more closer to the pentagram because of the womb that she possesses in the external plane. Okay, now understanding that when we're coming out on this side, we're taking these different characters and roles. So you know you're both of them, but you're seeing everything externally. So you need to put all the pieces together again. So what it's saying is that these secrets of shaping, forming, and fashioning and changing things can only be done with a hammer of light, a light hammer. And a light hammer is what woman has inside of her stomach. So sure, man needs to be there for sure because he has the other side of it. He has to strike. Man, there it is. I'm gone, man. Look, it's the anvil, which they always say is symbolic to the woman. The anvil, right? That's the thing that bing, 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 right? That stable foundational ground, right? And then what's hammering, right? That is a phallic gesture. Okay, so when they're saying Cain is smithing and you see Cain in there, you know, they keep showing you this man in there, the bearded man in the workshop beating this sword together because that's what they've been using alchemy for, making weapons, making money. But what alchemy really was is those two pentagrams that Cain had, those light hammers, which were those wombs, which created all of the human beings that came after that. And the way in which those humans were created, it was done with alchemy. Like, let's mix this with that. Let's put these two together. You see what I mean? So as we keep going, we find then that there is that form of the use of the creative component, but there's also this external use of the creative component, which we've talked about, and that's related to commerce and money. Okay? Because we see now that clearly God has become money. And the God of money has been stamped correctly because change has to come. And what this was symbolic to is that when commerce first began, it was because there was a monopoly on how everything worked. I need you to be very clear on this because this is already written down. You'll find it in Wikipedia that even in times before money started, there was already some kind of rulership happening, especially from the kings and queens of those times. And that rulership was almost like from what they would say is from on high. Okay? Meaning this was these beings were controlling from a space that we didn't even have access to, passing down decrees and laws of what should be done on earth. So symbolically, when money comes in because people start to agree that they're going to use another form of determining what is what and how much something costs. Basically, they're going to take energy into their own hands. Do you understand? So before energy, I'm going to keep going then. Before energy is all being run kind of like what you see with oligarchic families. They run all of the money, right? Do you get that, right? So in the oligarchy, they run all the money and they control everything through the money. But think about that on a higher level because you got to be able to zoom in and lens back in. When there was no money, because this is another replica, that's Bull again. But it's like, as I said, the dollar is the daddy and the coin is the son. But it's once again, you got to keep breaking down or using that same template to determine what is going on. So in this case, when there was no money, there was going to be no change because people didn't have anything to change with. They had laws that came down to them from on high about what they were supposed to do with what they received. And this is where tithing came in and all that. You're going to give this to the crown. You're going to give this. This is where taxation or air taxes. This is where all of that came from. It came from the Bull. The Pope was also doing that. He was passing down decrees to charge everybody and then using Knights Templars to enforce that. Okay? So what I'm getting at here is that you gotta keep realizing how the story keeps unfolding, because this is how energy moves. The thing that becomes the opposite pole flips into the other side. Remember how we were talking about in reincarnation that you're going to end up probably doing what you hate to do this life if you don't get balance? That happens with the energy. So even though Bull may have said no money at first, only this, what we're saying is the real money, which in this case was children. The people decided to create another system that became their money exchanging or energy exchanging system, and that replaced the old controllers. It's just the same way as cryptocurrency and decentralization is replacing the banking system. They're tussling with each other until eventually cryptocurrency becomes the centralized banking system. And then there will be something else again. There will be a change. So do you see how that's how energy is moving? It's oscillating through these experiences. So both forces technically need each other. But most importantly, to unite these two forces is to remove all needs and wants. All your desires shall be fulfilled within. Okay? So once again, let's just express this, that this creation of money was the creation of the ability to be able to start changing things. So first, when this rolls out, it's actually in direct spite to the old system. But the old system then governs it, takes over it, and begins to adopt it once more. So to slow that process down, you need to see that originally when money was created, it was created from commerce, right? And as we see here, merce is Mercury inside of the word commerce. And what this is a direct reference to is in your biblical scriptures, you'll find the analogy of Jesus going into the temple, and there are money changers there, and he flips over the table. Now, let's look at this from removing all of the conflictive components and just see what's being said. Okay, so this metaphorical Jesus is Hermes or Kundalini, right? Inside of the temple. We already talked about how the body is the temple. And some use this money as the form of alchemy, as we revealed that alchemy or the practice of alchemy has come out into money. These are the money changers. That's what they're using the alchemical Kundalini power for, is for money. Are we very clear? Because money for them, because they are banksters, equates to power. So this is how this alchemical power and hermetic power and even the power of the Messiah can be used like an antichrist or an anti-Kundalini or antichrist consciousness. Are we very clear? So this is why you had all these different brotherhoods, because some were using the power of alchemy and Kundalini for wickedness. To create an external form of wealth, to put others in debt. Okay? Now, this is what we start calling, it gets very doggish. Okay? This is where the term dog eat dog comes from, the dog eat dog world. Okay? And it's because what we find in history is that there's a correlation between the deity in the Hindu tradition called Sarama. And man, I got to read this script to you because I was like, yo, this is even on Wikipedia. Look at this. This is Sarama. So it turns out that the dog does play a very important role in the whole thing, because the dog is kind of seen as man's best friend, because in this process with Cain figures out, or the children of Cain, they start figuring out more about how spirits work and how to ride on spirits and even how to get spirits into different worlds. The Kemetans were also masters of this. They used bodies or different animals and different beings in order to move these energies around from plane to plane. And the dog's body, which also I think became synonymous with one, I believe it was the Ka or the Ba, but the soul of dogs was beginning to be used for Kas. So this means that you would use different vessels as an alchemist in order to move the souls along on their transmigration. So if you wanted to basically create or make a soul into something ultimately powerful, you would have to take it through the process of being a beetle first and then move it up through the chain of all of the other entities until eventually you got to what was really a wolf or a Canaan. Okay, this is where Cain comes from. He's a canine or a melanated black dog in certain texts. Okay. So in this, it's also not a male. This is what is crazy. Cain is Kahin. Kahin is where we get our word queen. So it proves once again, there's a hermaphroditic nature going on with this. And this, of course, introduces Hermanubis. Okay. You're watching the progress of the alchemical formation of existence. So let's read it here. It says that there are two epithets for Sarama in the original Rig Veda. Firstly, she is described as Sapadi, which means having good feet, fair-footed, and quick. Now, again, this is Hermes in the Hindu tradition. This is why we're all carrying pieces of a puzzle. And unless you can catch on, okay, quick, fair-footed, quick. Oh, that's Hermes. That's Quicksilver. And then this is the epithet. This is saying that her other epithet is Sabaga, the fortunate one. Fortune again. prosperity, springtime. We're talking again about Hermes, the beloved one that is loved in heaven and on earth. The Ushas, the dawn. Samara's other name, Devi Shuni, means divine bitch or bitch of the gods. What does that mean? That means this is the mother of the gods, or the mother of many of the gods. And you can continue to read this, and you'll read the story that basically the mother of the gods was a bitch. Hence why God backwards is a dog. Hence why all of the saviors are also females, and predominantly probably firstly females. And why you get this schism that happens in the world where it's like male versus female, and that confusion going on, even though when male and female come together, they create life. And if they don't come together, life can't be created. You see what I mean? So this relationship at times becomes like the relationship between a cat and a dog, as we mentioned before. And even deeper, a serpent and a lion. And even deeper, to realize that, you know how werewolves or wolves, what do? They howl at the what? They howl at the moon. Because there's a relationship between the dog, Hermes, Thoth, the moon, and all of that, because it's all saying the same thing. It's got to tell you life. It's got to tell you history. And just like the gates of the Queen of England, or what is that? The Birmingham, what is that? Is that Hampshire? Let me just pull this up real quick. This is the Buckingham Palace. Give me 1 second. So the queen on this plane right now, that's wearing that title or that designation, is sitting inside of a house that doesn't belong to her, but, we'll go with it. And definitely was not the original people sitting in that house. But on the gate has remained the same. And if you notice, and let's just pull one of these gigantic pictures, and I used to have one that would, there it is. I think there's one that was just licensable here that was huge. Sometimes when we're looking at this, we're always paying attention to what's going on around it. We see the lions, and first of all, there's no lions in England, by the way. It's just, but what is this with the crown on his head? And if you research this, you'll find out that this is a dog. So it's showing you once again that out of all of these powerful animals and all this going on in this crest and this regalia, it is this dog that they revere the most. Because this is, again, the symbolic God dog. This is the symbolic usherer into the netherworld. This is Anubis. This is the purpose or the use of the dog, which second to human beings and maybe some of the aquatic creatures like dolphins is probably one of the most reasoning beings on the planet, right? Man's best friend. So as we keep going through these mysteries, we find as we wind down here that this lost tribe, as I mentioned, this lost word and this restoration of the lost tribe, the lost word, and the return of the Messiah or the return of the Jedi is none other than the awareness of these great mysteries and how they function within us. And how these same things that we have conflict with are just underdeveloped, like relationships that are underdeveloped, stages of life and existence that are underdeveloped. And if you're in this field and you're creating growth and change and progress, you are then related to Thoth, a Jedi, Hermes, etc. because you transform things. You transform people. You don't just look at the problem. You try to come up with solutions. Or you regress into the old state. You then exact vengeance on others and you judge them. You cut off their supply. You do not help them up the ladder. You kick them down, and you work and you toil night and day to blot their name out. That's the two forces we're dealing with here. So don't get it twisted. I know that a lot of us are loving beings, but be aware there are beings that, just as you read in the Sumerian text, they disagree. They feel we make too much noise. Remember, noise is energy and vibration. When you read the ancient books to really understand what it was that the gods got upset about, as I said, it wasn't just the metaphorical mating that went on in the garden. That is it. But they said that everything on the planet began to populate. This is why they called Hermes the god of spring. Hermes is also Pan. The Herm is if you Google Herm, you'll see a pan like Djedi with the penis out. And this is because it's symbolic to a procreative component, mating with Earth and creating more beings. And they're saying that the sound and the vibration of that disturb the gods, disturb the original, because it is the act of creating and changing and making more. Okay, now money is also that. It is the act of creating and changing and making more. It produces springtime. People feel abundant. They feel like they can go and sow some seeds. But all of this was first related to, as you'll notice, as the body begins to pick up more Kundalini, it becomes more orgasmic. It feels like it wants to create. And people learn how to use that force and use it in, well, they can create children with it, but they can also create amazing things in this plane with it. They can also create amazing things in the astral plane with it, because that's ultimately even what the male gained from this Hermetic tradition, which was the Immaculate Conception of the Golden Lotus, which was basically the ability for a male to create a womb or activate the male womb, which births in the astral plane. And we talked about this before, that the mind of the male is also doubling as a womb now in the transmutation of what we're saying is the male. This is why you have many of these cults that they don't initiate females, and there's this anti-female thing going on because they're still in that power struggle. And generally, it's just one person teaching another person the hatred and the separation. I don't want any parts of it. I don't care who you're talking about. It all has a place. The devil itself has a place. They say preferably beneath your feet. But the reality is here is that if we keep coming into conflict with everything, we're only coming into conflict with ourselves, and we're not demystifying what all of this is going on around us. Finally, the power of resonance. This comes directly from a script that I have to copy. I have to type it out and share it with you. It's a part of the original Emerald tablets, which was very interesting that there is one. That was just wild to me. I would have thought somebody already did the research, but apparently not. There's a Emerald tablet that was written. There was a book called The Seed of Creation. I think it's called The Secret of Creation. Okay. Now, if you try to Google that, you'll get a bunch of stuff. So I'll send that in the tribe. It's a work that was originally written by, this is not even just a scholar. This was a genie of some sort. This is what it's like in that tradition of the Arabic tradition is very rich. As we talk about this Moorish tradition of the mysticism that they were involved in is very rich. And he goes on about the power of and the awareness of the power of as above, so below. So he basically transcribes from the original Emerald tablets, which back then everyone really knew the original, and the original they were making copies of. The one that is in publication right now, this was something that I wanted to speak on earlier, but I'm glad I make sure I get it in this conversation. The emerald tablets that you're looking at right now generally is written by Dorial. I believe personally that this recording is going to enlighten many. So I want to make sure certain things are on this recording so that there's no confusion. And I do know, again, there are those who are opposed to the transformation that we're all going through into the awareness of ourselves. And because of that, it is important to speak very candidly about certain things. So I have to reveal why the emerald tablets that is in publication is none other than a very divisive, racist-based script of how it was changed, because the emerald tablets only consist of really one page. Okay. And there are subsequent tablets which were elaborations by masters. Dorial's version is a change and elaboration by him. Okay. Now, there is a brotherhood that is known as the Brotherhood of the White Temple, also known as the Great White Brotherhood. We see that today as the Ku Klux Klan. We know that Albert Pike was a grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. We know that Albert Pike took the knowledge of Kukulkan, which was taken from the knowledge of Quetzalcoatl, which was the original Kemetic coming out of Kemet, which we know because the Sun Temple was built on the cubit, and nobody can build on the cubit because it's basically the L. It's the space between your elbow. It's measured with your elbow. And so in this, we had the great masters migrating from Kemet all the way into the place that you're calling Amaraka, or the immortal serpent, or America. In this process, there seemed to have been a meltdown, that Tupac Amaru Shakur did not return. Tupac Amaru Shakur, or Amaru, is the immortal serpent, also another name for Kundalini. Let me just put it here. That's Amaru. I won't even put in Shakur because we'll just get Tupac. Mind you, Tupac was from the cult of Thuggee. Actually, there's an image of the cult of Thuggee here, Amaru. This is the cult of Anubis, or the gods of the underworld. Okay, so this the Thuggee. This is why the whole thing happened with the thug life, right? The cult of Thuggee comes from India, right? And again, the thugs do smoke marijuana, but not all of the thugs. The thugs originally started with Bin Saba, who were the Hashashin. They weren't thugs at first. They protected the realm. When the realm began to crumble, another order was erected, and that order became basically thugs. They robbed people. They were mercenaries. As you see in the beginning of mercenary, you get merce, which is Mercury again. They were hermetic. They possessed the hermetic knowledge, but they used it to master others. That's what Kukulkan did. Quetzalcoatl was the original, and Kukulkan was the replacement. Okay? So Kukulkan, in the cult of Kukulkan, sacrificed through hanging. And when Albert Pike got these mysteries from, I believe, the tomb of Pakal, he continued the quest of what we would say is Bulel, to begin to exterminate the serpent tribe, or the hidden tribe, or the lost tribe of Judah, who have been predominantly in America in the first place, known as the tribes or the Native Americans. Okay? So the Native Americans inside of the United States were there already. They were not bought there. Okay? I got to show a little bit of imagery here. Give me one moment. These are thugs. They represent the cult of Thuggee. In the cult of Thuggee, you don't take a bath. It was a part of being able to consecrate yourself with what you would say is negative or unclean energies, also known as the unclean dragon. See, there were different types of dragons. There were water dragons, fire dragons, or different types of kundalini. That kind of kundalini was based on the alchemical composition of the person. Right? So your kundalini, some people think that kundalini is all the same thing, but no, each alchemical vessel determines the quality and the constant of the kundalini that is flowing through them. Okay. So I'm scrolling through some pictures here. Give me one quick second. So what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about in America, which you're calling North America now, especially around the areas of California, around the areas of Michigan, you had tribes already of what you would say is Native Americans, but they were already initiated into what you would say is a brotherhood. And nowadays that brotherhood and sisterhood is deemed to be the Moorish brotherhood and sisterhood. Give me a quick moment. I'm still scrolling. This was still a while ago. Now, remember, we've talked about all this. So if you're just jumping in and all of this is like, well, shoot, I mean, are you just coming up with this tonight? No, I'm just refreshing everybody's memory. Remember, we went over Xenophalas. These are images from things that we had already went over. We showed how somehow the Messiah himself was some type of dog because there wasn't only one Messiah. And we find that even the Antichrist actually was more of a Xenophaly, or actually a dog face. And that the dog face men, which were hooded and shapeshifters, were known to be in the Vatican. The can in Vatican is the can of Can, which is Cain. Cain or Can or the dogs. So these are the sons of Cain, right? Just like, again, we're doing a Tour de France here. This is Khalifa, or Kali. She's the goddess of California. That gold is a being. These are the inhabitants of California. These are Native Americans, right? Before the Mongols entered the territories, which is happening over the process of hundreds of years. This is not, or thousands of years, while we try to see life or history as episodic. It is not an episode. This was going on, and this is what is being blotted out. That's why I was saying there are those that are trying to blot out the memory. And if they blot out any of the races and the creeds, and even how they came to us, as you see here, for knowledge and advice about territories, we gave them places to live and places to stay. We formed a brotherhood and a pact and a sisterhood. We married into each other's families only to later on become double-crossed. And this happens over and over and over again, where we're not seeing the unity of the symbolism and how this belongs to all of us. But when one group tries to take this power and then tries to keep it from themselves, keep it from everyone else, they only serve to bar themselves from it, exclude themselves from it, while not being able to inherit it themselves. And while they'll be able to try to make mutations with themselves and to change themselves in the way in which they are, they will only continuously create more and more of a problem until they return to their original state. So do you see why they are also trying to return to the original state by ending it for everyone else, when the original state was more of something like this, where you see the ancient ancestors and the same symbolism about Kundalini and serpents all replete within the history of humanity, and that there's a disconnect or a lost tribe because humans don't realize how they climbed out of the water and into life on the physical plane. How they don't understand how the queen of heaven, that heaven is none other than the ocean, that Ashtara or Ishtar and Nana, also known as the queen of heaven, is actually the key also to the same symbolism that we're looking at today, that this is none other than in itself a caduceus, but just in another shape and a stylized format, that all of these symbols are again nothing but caduceus, and this just represents us. But when someone else takes this symbolism and they decide that they want it to represent only them, then it excludes all of us, and they create this monopoly on it. The same way that we're seeing this happening today inside of the world, where all the businesses and all the forms of commerce, Facebook just bought up everything. YouTube bought up everything. Bill Gates bought up Discord. They buy up Skype. They buy up everything that we use to communicate, everything that we've spent time and people have spent time creating. They come with their money and they buy it. And meanwhile, the ancient mysteries have yet to even be explored. These ancient things, the power of the symbolism, the ancient gods, the real power is yet to, this was what we were doing. This is what took us time to put together. This is the temple that crumbled when they said, hey, when they were building the temple, they were looking at them and seeing how they were progressing. And they said, hey, if they keep building together, and if they keep building, they're going to eventually build up to heaven. Because that's what happens when you create souls and you bring souls into existence. We build on each other. That's why we say it is kingdom supporting kingdoms. The lowest of us become the primordial aspects of who we are. The ancient ones make up our foundation, and their temperaments sometimes are unchanging because they are foundations, and we have to know how to navigate through all of this. This is Bull-El. This is who's known as Zervan. You see what I mean? Unchangeable, unmovable controllers in the matrix. And this comes out to you in English as, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. What does that mean? That means that the changes are so you know how like you can't move all of New York into your house right now? Right? You can't even move some of your family members into your house right now. It's like you can deal with them, but not in your house, right? That's why in my Father's house, there are many mansions. That means that there are many worlds. And the beings that really don't get along, they're not in the same mansion together. But if you want to make it to the big house, then you're going to have to realize how things connect. And a lot of those old primordial states of not changing, just like those very new stages of change, you got to be able to know the weights and measures. You are the judge. You're the arbitrator. That's the perfect word. It's the arbitration that you do. You discover what's going to be the formula because you had eaten from the tree of knowledge. Now you know left and right, or good and evil, or up and down, or light and weight. You now have this power. So you can see how some can be easily become consumed by this power. And it has no power, no problem digesting them. You see what I mean? Like it's very sacred. And so these mysteries, again, they are the keys because they unlock us. This is not about anybody else or anything else. This is about what's going on inside of you that you knew not. And oftentimes, the outside of the temple does not necessarily bear a resemblance to what is within. A person can put on all this makeup and act beautiful and put on all these clothes and these diamonds and all this shit, and inside be doubly dead. While some who seem to have nothing have come into possession of it all. And where you're at is you're monitoring and observing all of this, determining what you're going to do. So I'll read this. Once again, the power of resonance. From these differences in combination, relationships of sympathy and antipathy results between the substance of different beings. Some seek each other, others repel one another. They turn and carry themselves to each other because of the affinities that exist between them. They seem to invite beings who are like them to unite with them and to repulse those which are contrary to them by the opposition they display to them. This is the fundamental principle of the science of the alchemical treatise, Smaragdus Tabulus, or the Emerald Tablets. This comprises the knowledge of the primitive cause of the variety of beings, meaning the original reason why or what, when, where, how all this started coming about only is because of the cold and the heat, the wet and the dry, and how one like attracts and the other repels the variant of the type of being, and that creates their temperament. And why that may be so hard for you to see, because you may only have a rudimentary idea of what these forces are. You may only feel wind but never see it. You may only feel fire and see fire but always get burned by it. You may only have a rudimentary understanding that never allows you to communicate with what these forces truly are. And that, my friend, is what makes the cup half full. So I will always remain a pure optimist in all of this, no matter how long this takes, no matter how many James Evans Bomars III that need to keep coming through the space to make sure that we return for our beloved. And that we don't inherit the stubbornness of Bulel, who is still confined like a minotaur in the middle of a maze in the mind. This is the Saturnalian principle that is still stuck. And it's not always a male, and it's not always a female. Every being contains an androgynous state. It's also important for me to mention again that this hammer, this is why you can't hammer without it. This hammer right here is a pentagram, and it's symbolic. It's a creator. Okay? And what this means is that this is a goddess, right? This is the symbol of the goddess. This right here. This is why Ishtar always has the pentagram around her. Okay? Now, this is also how you see that in order for there to be movement and creation in a world, it's necessary for someone to do all of that. And we are the vessels of that. So the power in this symbol is also when you see 50 pentagrams on the flag, this is a representation of 50 goddesses or 50 wives. We find in one of the tales of Thoth that Thoth had 50 wives. And what this is a representation of is nations. An ability to create different nations in order to bring change into the space and to allow potential for other beings that did not have that potential. And sometimes that is a sacrifice. So that double cross was a sacrifice. We don't have to make that sacrifice anymore. That's the symbolism beside the Messiah, of the Messiah on a cross, sacrificed, being double crossed by Judah. You see what I mean? They're tying all the symbolism together. How can you get betrayed by Judas? Judas is Judea. The Judea is the person on the cross. You see what I mean? So this is where they're literally saying if they cross your consciousness, it basically becomes like snapping two positive and negative wires together. Pow! So the more powerful you become, if you stay in conflict, you'll blow all your system. You will melt down, literally. Kundalini is heat. So when it's coming through, if it doesn't feel welcome in one of these worlds and it goes into conflict, it's going to go to war. So all of that fire coming up that wants to pass through is going to get stuck in a chakra, and there's going to be a war between the Kundalini or Thoth, Hermes, and Bulel or Set. And when these two forces start conflicting, this makes up the games. This is why there's Olympians. This is why there's Titans. That's what all those stories are about. So for us, I feel like that it's time to graduate the universe or the university. We're taking it so serious, we're hurting each other in the space now. This knowledge and this wisdom and this awareness, it unites all things. I don't want to hear anything else from anybody else about any other entities or any other skin suits or any other petty stuff, because the reason why humanity is not activated yet is self-evident now. It's based on what we're doing. So, Asclepius time, Acreon and Caudatius staff and Mashushu time. You know, you might have all these, you know how the rappers wear all these chains, they got all these damn crosses and stuff. They have no clue what this means. It's you need to bring out every method that you know how to perform the great work on these beings. And stop sitting there passing judgment like you're Bulel all the time and getting pinned into the mind like a fat minotaur, not able to escape the maze, right? So lastly, some final notes. I wanted to give the opportunity, because we talked about, well, first of all, let me make sure I glance over all images here. Yep. I wanted to give the opportunity because it would be good to digest, right? That if you have a question, you type that question inside the chat and I'll answer that question. Because what I went through tonight, which I actually did in a very concise period of time, it's already coiled up. And when it begins to unravel, you're going to start seeing it all around you. You're going to see the power all around you. It's going to start uniting things that you were once in conflict with. Right? Universe. United in conflict. Uni, it means together. Verse means to oppose. So the real meaning of life is that there is a force that is united and there is a force that is against. There is a force that is a totality and there's a force that is separate. And what we've learned over time is it's very powerful to have a real control over what space you're entering from one moment to the next. And that when in doubt, choose unity. Because it is always the direction that will continue to produce growth. It'll continue to produce change. It will give you compassion. That is your compass to Zion. It'll allow you to be able to navigate yourself. Do not take on some of these old forms of consciousness and concepts that have been placed into this matrix that are anti our mother, anti our brothers and sisters, and the process of their growth. People can't even see that the nations are growing through spectrums. Temperaments change color. Every time you're signing up for another experience, that's kind of governing how are you going to go from yellow or let's say you're going to go from light cream all the way down to dark or light cream pink, all the way down to dark jet black, right? And when you're finally done, when they finally vomit you out of Ouroboros and we ask you, so we good or you need to go in for another lesson, you'll stand up. And you'll say, you know what, I get it. And you'll do that in a conscious way. People keep thinking that beyond this, there's no consciousness and that you won't be able to communicate and know what you have done and how you've gone on. And they just don't know. Remember, this is an eternal existence. So I'm going to look in here now and make sure that there's some digestion happening here. Again, you look at this one again, because even when I transmitted it into paper, like for instance, here's how we know that we keep getting, there's a connection here between a female Messiah. Any being that has Nin on their name in the Sumerian pantheon always has a female, is a female. So Nin Hersag, right? It just continues to go on, Ninini. So then when you come to Ningrashida, but Ningrashida is supposed to be Thoth, and Thoth is supposed to be a male, something doesn't check out until you realize, it's Hermes. Also, even with Venus, because it goes on that Hermanubis or Aphrodite is a mating of Aphrodite, or a hermaphrodite. Okay, that is Hermes and Venus, right? This is wild because it's literally saying that's Mary and Jesus. Mary is clearly Venus, the queen of heaven, Inanna, Ishtar, right? And then the son she's holding is clearly Thoth. That's her son. And it also talks more about the sky gods and how sky gods do seed into planets like wombs and dip. But through their resonance, their children return to them, because they say the sky gods are like the sun, and their children eventually return to them because they always look up and there's a connection, and they feel this connection, and they see the presence of the connection in the world. So we are standing. That's why they say his father is the sun, his mother is the moon. They're talking about you, that you're standing on earth, but you have another relative that is in the sky. And so that's how these mysteries roll out. So here's what a question is. What about barter? What about it? Any form of commerce or trade is actually just the act of moving one thing or changing things from one hand to another, right? So the question is also, if you do have if you have a question, put a question mark behind it. I was trying to read and look at the question at the same time. If you have a question, put the question mark behind it. So it says, gatekeeper is the God keeper. You need to exchange. I am trying to find applications, okay? Gatekeeper. I'm not sure where so let's say instead of gatekeeper, let's say what we're talking about is we're talking about a tour guide, more like a tour guide, not a gatekeeper, not you shall not pass into this space. Those are Bullel concepts. The only gatekeeper there actually is the space that is in between octaves. And I actually had a nice variant of that to show. I won't probably be able to pull it up now, but the film in between one dimension and the next is the gatekeeper. And this film is basically what you can't handle, what you can't understand, what you can't grow in, what you can't meld with. That's what creates the separation. So the gatekeeper is you. And how it gatekeeps is through the fear of the connection with whatever it is on the other side of self. And we talked about that gatekeeper is oftentimes what keeps us from the astral plane, because in the astral plane, there's no air. There's no four elements, if you may. There's only aether. Aether is the tip of the pentagram, so it can rise into the next plane. The other elements, they cap off at a certain space. And because of that, because there's no air, there's no oxygen. And with no oxygen, there's no need to breathe. There's no wants. Look at what anytime you read deeply about masters and gurus obtaining samadhi, it was because they reached a state where they didn't need anything, even breath, even food, so they could tap into that original state of how we can operate, that everything comes from within. So this is why this code, it tumbles. It's a tumbling code. It's a cipher because it seems so paradoxical and oxymoronic and hypocritical. As it moves about, it confirms itself and then denies itself. This is why you must be quick. You must have the ability to be able to see the slight differentiations between the spaces. So let's keep going here. Commerce and Black's Law Dictionary intercourse, blah, blah, blah. Again, just question marks after this because I'm just be reading through these like comments. When Thoth Anubis is introducing self to the God of the next space would also be a reintroduction to self. Okay, what is happening here is that when you leave the space, okay, so it's a sum total. We call it the summary, right? So all of the tones and vibrations that you've emitted thus far are totaled up, right? So this is why Thoth, in this metaphorical measuring of scales, is all a part of this session that takes place. And it probably takes place, if we wanted to give it in time, there is no time. So it would be like a twinkling of an eye. One moment you would leave here and you would go to the next space. In between there, though, you're going into fourth dimension or the elevator. In that space, now you're going to be introduced to the new space. So remember, you can even see Earth or this as God. It is a living being. Nature is on a whole nother level. Stuff that's still grossing you out, it already mated with. You see what I mean? So when you got introduced to Earth, something introduced you to Earth. You see what I mean? You have a teacher, an instructor, a guide. Okay, that's where this whole thing came with people thinking they had guides or a totem. You really do. You have a guide, and that guide is like in front of you, right? So look at it one more time. One second. All right, so I'm going to pull up the image here really quick. Okay. Again, this is metaphorical. It's in every culture. It's always the same depiction, but who's doing it this time is just going to depend on the culture. This is why this being doesn't have horns on their head. Because basically they haven't leveled up yet. They haven't turned on Kundalini. So Ningrashita is here, right? I'm not sure if you're seeing that on my screen. I think so. And this is God, which is a female. Right? That does not look like a male. That looks like a female. Because it's going to another matrix or a mistress or a matrix. The introduction must take place. This means that we need to do a sum total of your frequencies real quick. So somebody's going to speak for you on your behalf because you don't communicate in the language of the gods. You learn how to communicate in the language of the gods when you turn on Kundalini. So until then, somebody got to speak for you. This is where court comes from. Court is this whole thing. This is the whole thing you see in court with the judge and the dress and the Saturnalians and the bar and the law and all of that, natural law and life and all this stuff that's going on in court is a replication of this right here. Them trying to bring, that's Masonics, Masonic work, Freemasons with a docked vessel on land trying to bring in the secret mysteries in to fit their own. They're still staying in order. They are in the order. Okay. The Jesuits are also called the order. It's Bullel, God on earth, a vicar. Okay. But also a plagiarist, an antichrist, because again, Lucifer is more of a hermaphrodite, more of a female, not a male. So every time they introduce something or introduce a concept, they always lie about it. So that means that they must be dealing with the father of lies. And that, again, leads to Bullel. So, because Bullel is, of course, the Demerge. I created the world. No, you did not. Yaldabaoth is Bullel. Okay, so these are the same characters, but you need to understand how they play out in the consciousness. Okay? So now what we're seeing here is we're seeing this soul, which does not have horns. So it has not risen Kundalini, being escorted into the next plane. So if you could imagine when you have this process of going from this frequency to the next, what happens in between then that determines what parents you get, what country you're born in, whether you're misfortunate, whether you get an opportunity. It's your arbitrator, your totem, your guide that is used to communicating in that space that is going to communicate on your behalf. Now, when you raise Kundalini, because this Ningrashita, your guide, is operating outside of you in that case. It's like Kundalini leading you by the hand. When you activate, you are Kundalini. You're not waiting on a Messiah. You are the Messiah. You're not waiting to get healed by the great snake. You are the great snake of healing. Do you see what I mean? So you get this juxtaposition. Is somebody saying something? All right. Sean, are you out there?
I got you covered, Bob.
Okay, thanks a lot. All right, I just wanted to make sure that, we were still connected. So I'm almost done here. We're answering questions. We're digesting because it's very important that there's no confusions here. Question, Supreme, I give thanks for the stream of current where we're in and the force to craft the swords, to paint the image needed to traverse the time to self-realization. I guess the question is coming. Has the Porlandra Garden Project attained this unity within nature? The co-creative white brotherhood made up a overlighting deva of a healing nature pan map team medical assistance program of higher self. Okay. When it comes, we will see it. The whole world will see it. Meaning when they accomplish it, you answer that question. Listen to them. See how they reason. See what they are speaking of and whether those things are applicable to you in this life and in the next. And then you will make a decision. I can't judge something that I don't know about. I guess the Porlandra Garden Project is someone that is saying they have attained this. I won't say that no one has obtained this. I will say, just look, feel, see how they're reasoning, because what we're doing is we're scanning the entire globe for more Jedi. I check YouTube every day for someone who's inspired by Ethereum. You can tell when it happens. There's a certain vernacular, a certain lexicon. There's a certain way they move. There's a certain thing they connect. So you can see this as like attracts like and resonance attracts resonance. And that discernment is key, because if it's just everything that you want to hear, namaste, we're going to beat evil forces. What evil forces? You mean the ones that have not been completely changed, that are still in the process of changing? What beating? What will we fight with? You see what I mean? So you need very clear things, because this is not mist anymore. This is not delusion or illusion. This is us getting very clear on these mysteries and how they work within. So check it out. See what you see. Question, the image with 4 tools with the Ankh, the second one, the symbols going up the staff seem to highlight the spin starting at a point. Okay, so I think that would be this tool. Possibly. I mean, I may put figures next time on this. So I I'm hearing that possibly what the person is saying is this one. Okay. And that's Alan. And so maybe they're saying the image of these 4 tools. So I'm assuming that they're talking about the 4 things that are in here that are listed as 12. Give me a second, though. I think I need to rewind for a minute here because I didn't finish the last question. And the rewind here is first that, again, if we're talking about the Great White Brotherhood, we're talking about the OTO or the Golden Dawn. So that should be very clear. So when they're saying they're creating something and have done something, let me see it. Because what I've seen so far, and remember, this is not someone comes in and tries to change everything. This is when you come in, you're in the order. And so this team of people has been pretty instrumental at making sure that humanity does not get the light and does not unite, no matter what is on their tongues. So really check it. I just didn't see that the end of that was the co-creative white brotherhood. Now, if we're talking about the great white brotherhood, so I just want to make sure that this is very clear. So that way, none of what I said in the beginning gets undone through confusion of questions. Now, if we're saying the co-creative white brotherhood, as far as just white being a creative component, that would be another question, and it needs to become more specific. So I just want to make sure that's clarified, because the Great White Brotherhood, or GHB, see me on the astral plane. We'll just say it like that. It's just ridiculous at this stage. Like I only act like this when we talk about this is because I've seen how much damage this has done over time and how many souls have been lost. And mind you, this is not just people that are back there trying to read knowledge and comprehend it. This is people actually hating other people and even hurting other people for service into a power that is basically what they call, this is very interesting because they call this that there's 2 serpents that are going up the staff, and that one serpent is going down. So they've aligned themselves with that energy. And what that energy does is it pulls other things down. And while that could become useful as a challenge, like weight and gravity can become useful as a challenge, when that is being done to beings that don't even know what's going on in the first place, or even children, now it becomes where you're breaking the laws of nature. And we expected nature to enforce those laws, but that's not who the enforcer is. Hermes, Thoth, the Jedi are the enforcers of the laws of nature. And when there's no enforcer, the place becomes lawless. This enforcement is not necessarily beating someone up. It's coming in with the real mysteries and displaying the product of the mysteries so that others are able to actually see the truth and know the truth. And that's the same. That's what I'm saying. The whole thing with Jesus, if you really understand what's going on, it's them, once again, GHB, plagiarizing the knowledge of Kundalini, which is more of a female, putting it into a Caucasian male's body, and then going on from there with a story that has led millions of people astray. So these kind of things can't be really taken lightly at times when you see a whole realm go into dissension because of this. So I just want to make it very clear that there are those that are opposed to the growth of humanity. And it's very important that we at least see clearly of where they are, because it's like a snake, a poisonous, venomous snake. If you can see it, then you don't step on it. You don't even walk by it. But if you can't see it, and then somehow you end up in one of their sanctums, they're just going to feed on you. And that's what's been going on in these spaces, is that they're feeding on souls. So there is a light matter to this where we can speak about these things, but we also need to understand these things are very serious. There's a reason why 300 people or 3,000 people are dying every day in pain through suffocation. You see what I mean? Like the strangling aspect of that coming into the dimension where people they're leaving the realm through not being able to breathe. That's called a strangler. That means that someone has opened up Someone has opened up basically if you can see the openings to the other world as vaginas, you can see that all vaginas are not clean. What that would be like is looking at a snake that has a very poisonous mouth. This would be like a dark coven of let's say witches, where they're witches or warlocks, and they would keep breeding in that coven like breathing snakes until eventually they produce a very poisonous snake. And then that snake would become the adversary to humanity. So this is what they're working with. So they went a little bit, how you think, well, damn, that's pretty deep. I mean, how could somebody do that? You could see that there's different types of beings here in the world. There's not the ones always that think about how are we going to assist everyone. But the beings that are thinking like that need to start being aware of what else is going on, so they're not so naive in these places that they're walking into, imagining that they're going to be given the truth. When if you were going to be given the truth, you can see it already. You can hear what the person's saying, and you can hear what they're trying to give you, and you can see that if it's applicable or not, versus if it's just words, right? So have that discernment, because it's necessary these days and these times, especially with this level of awareness. So the question is, we're going to get into rapid fire here, is I'm assuming what you're saying is these 4 tools. Now, these 4 tools, or anytime you see 4, it's none other than the 4 elements. In fact, I believe that Rahu and Ketu together are actually the body of Hermes, and the splitting of Rahu and Ketu because that's the moon in the north hemisphere and the south hemisphere, the moon. Remember, we gave the name. I think that was no, it's not Brihaspati, but the name escapes me now. But it's Rahu and Ketu when they come together, or the numbers 7 and the number 4 when they come together, right? And what that creates is that creates the different nodes of the moon. I think I've been talking over here with this on. So that creates the different nodes of the moon. But as you see, Thoth is the moon. So it's talking about something being split. So that split is the separation from male from female. So the separation from male from female creates the wave or the force or creation or life. So you see how all of that, it always stems back into the same thing, and that's what the master key is. That Caduceus staff is the master key. It's not only the symbol, it is God. That's why they say in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What's the Word? You are the Word, right? So this is how you come into that awareness of how this power connects within you. So lastly, so anytime you see that, they're saying in that staff, this is fire, earth, wind, water inside of the spine. And your mixtures of this fire, earth, wind, water is going to determine whether you're able to raise the Djed or activate Kundalini, i.e. become the Lord of North and South Kemet, or North and South Egypt. This is to wear the Bennu bird and to wear the serpent on the same crown, right? So in Kemet, if you had the double crown with the bird and the serpent, it meant that you basically went above, which is the bird, and you went below, which is the serpent, and you have been able to unite both of those kingdoms. We talked about this before, right? And when you're able to unite what's above with what is below, not keep them in war and separation and confusion and conflict. You see what I mean? When you're able to unite it, and that takes shit. It's almost like serpent charming. If you got all these snakes running around here, you're basically trying to convince them to stop biting each other. That takes charm. You see what I mean? That takes that person coming in with the flute, which is Pan, who's Hermes, trying to figure out how to, you see what I mean? So it's always the same symbolism over and over again. And that's why I said it's a master key, and it'll start unlocking things for you. So as we go on, this is saying, how does one cope with sadistic coworkers or family? Okay, stop. you keep going down the ladder again. You're in the change, still in the changing process. You coping with it, if you can't, that just is allowing you to see technically where you're at. It's just a gauge. Nobody is saying, hey, you got to do it. But there's gotta be something that allows you to understand this is how far I'm getting. So if every time it's always how am I gonna deal with X, you're not taking on your power yet. Because your power teaches you how to deal with anything. You're talking about coworkers. Like there are other things out there to be a bit more concerned about if you're still in conflict. But if you know how to work these alchemical treaties and these hermetic principles, family members, job, everything does not have that same level of sway on what's going on because you learn how to attract what you want. You learn that, if you're watching zombie movies, you're screwing it up for yourself. If you're going to McDonald's and this kind of thing, and you're not even preparing your food, and there's a list to this, and this is what we teach. And when you're doing these kind of things, then it's going to create certain results. So then you can't come back and say, why am I not getting into love, my parents and everybody around me? But that's you. That's what you think you're getting away with, basically. That's what you think is not affecting you. Because that's you. But when you're not a God, you don't believe that. All supreme beings know this is theirs and it all came from them. And they take the responsibility like it's their own. When you're not supreme, you think it's separate. You think that it belongs to them. So you see, like our mother, she knows it belongs to her. This is all her responsibility. She's going to take that responsibility and she's going to send emissaries. That's why Hermes exists. That's why she has a son to toil in the field and toil in the garden, to have a daughter that is going to toil in the field and toil in the garden. So you see, there's a work in progress really here. There's a real great work. Not this false, fake imitation Freemasonry. There's a real new world order. Not this false, fake Freemasonry. It's the time in which we unlock these things within us and then witness the power that they have. But if that's not going to happen in your micronucleus, and I'm not hollering at you, I'm hollering at myself. If that's not going to happen in your micronucleus, where you can start hitting that wand on things around you, this is preparing you for the big leagues. Just look at it like that. Feel great about it. This is the practice. This is that machine that throws the ball and you keep hitting it. You're not in the real thing yet. You're in training. So see it that way. Take the training and start going beyond it. If it's something that you feel like, okay, I can't harmonize with this, go beyond it to another octave and look at it again. So the next question is, once again, well, that's not a question, so I won't read it. This one is, I've heard that the way Rahu can have an adverse effect on its subjects by disconnecting the Kundalini in the middle. Is that what's being eaten? Is as it said, Rahu swallows the sun? And is there a connection with this symbolically eating bread in the communion of the Romans and the Greeks, which eventually leads to splits in the Catholicism and the Orthodox? Now, I've explained each of these things in their own respective rights. But what I will say directly is that remember that when we go higher on the ladder, it allows us to see things that others could not see. So even those that wrote books at times saw it only from their state. And we may be in a loftier region. So when we look at Rahu and Ketu, and if it says that, hey, Rahu is disconnecting the Kundalini, what it's saying is that, well, if Rahu and Ketu are not connected, that would disconnect Kundalini, because Kundalini is the force that moves. That is the moon. That is the energy that is moving through us. So if energy is not moving because you only have Rahu and not Ketu, or yin and not yang, or any two opposing properties it's going to create the same effect. And when we get deeper into it, when we start looking at the dogma of history, then we can kind of get lost in that dogma, because what we talked about communion was, rather than that being a schism between the Catholicism and the Orthodox, it was the act of eating the flesh or eating the flesh or the bread or the bone and drinking the blood. And what this was is the ultimate act of communion is transmutation, to be able to not just consume something, but to be able to transmute its energy into its next stage, just like the world does every day. The ground does it. Nature does it. It transmutes things into another stage. This is the metamorphosis from a worm, which is the chief hermaphroditic creature, by the way. The most hermaphroditic of all organisms are worms, right? And transmutes them into another stage. So it's like, instead of seeing it sometimes as such a conflictive, destructive, evil process, you have to be able to decipher what is happening, not fear death and dismemberment, and see where you're also, how you're transmuting things is going to determine how you're being transmuted. How you're judging things is going to determine how you are judged. Because when you start taking a different perspective and perception into the reality, all of the reality changes. So even when you die, you only go into the reality how you perceive it. That's why it's important to get control over the reins. But if you actually perceive enemies, when you go into the next reality, enemies appear. So what it is it's about things being put in their proper place, and sometimes avoiding always looking in the drama that would be so extensive it couldn't be accounted. It'd be like watching a novella. You can't watch the world for 1,000 years or read a book about the world from 1,000 years. You can't do it. So you're going to only get episodes. And what humanity loves is the drama. So they pick out the part of the episode where it hits the climax. They don't tell you what happened before then and identify the characters of the story and what brought them up into that point, because they're so interested in just getting the energetic potential of that moment. And that's what these religious systems are consistently conflicting and colliding about. Right, is just that little part of the truth that they have and how they want to be chosen, but they don't want to unite the mysteries. They want to always say that how they have it and others do not. Why we're trying to unite all of these mysteries together. And that's why I'm never shy at coming in here or ashamed to come in here and say, let's get a new perspective on this. Like, I can tell by the energetic potential of something to whether it's the truth or not. So I move a dial. And when I start feeling myself getting more connected and I feel the power coursing through in a pure way, then I know I'm turning that dial and I'm actually tuning into that frequency the proper way. When I see that thing getting off, which could even become in things that you feel like, oh, I'm nailing it. And now I'm like, I hate this. And now I'm not doing that anymore. And then this could throw you off if it's starting to create conflicts and enemies and opponents inside of your consciousness again. And we go through that process, but there's a point where, since we're at 8 degrees, where all of that has to cease, because we're like at the top. So things got to start merging together. So instead of even those last components, movable and unmovable, it's like, let's get in the car together. You start seeing those components as, okay, well, you're unmovable and you're movable, and what am I? Oh, I'm the child of movable and unmovable. So that gives me a whole other potential. And that's what you really are, is you have this potential. But you can imagine that you're going to see all sorts of stuff, because I think the next question is, okay, but protecting our children is the real battle that needs the real energy diverted to the manifestation of these sanctuaries. The pedophiles are the start of this war within. I find myself willing to burn them up with my glare, using the Kundalini this way and advocating against. And so there's, again, we're going on with the conflict, and we understand the pain. Again, like, I'm not trying to discount anybody else's buffoonery on the realm. But what I'm saying is the greatest damage of what we are doing to ourselves is we're not moving beyond it. I'll tell you how it was appearing to me. I was in the astral plane and there was a team there, and everybody in the team had powers. The land was radiated. Somehow people had become infected and sick to a point where, wow, this is crazy because it's almost what is even happening right now. I had this dream written. It was like at least 14 years ago. Everybody was fenced in, like they were on quarantine. And they were like evil. If anything you could think of as evil, this is how they were acting. And in that mode, and where I was at, especially spiritually, is I was in the army of the Lord in this case. And all I wanted to do was kill demons, fight demons. So when I saw these beings that were infected and how evil they were, I jumped over the gate and I started beating on one of them. And I was beating it and beating it and beating it. And this was going on in the dream. And it was dead clearly after I was beating it. But I started to feel the transmissions from this team. And this team was saying, you see what you're doing? You're becoming it. And then I looked and I had become infected by it because I was beating it. So what that meant to me is that the more that I keep trying to fight this war in that same mindset that they're fighting it with, I'm only becoming them. This is not a fight. Good will always triumph. It's just a winning team. There's a time and a place here. There's a period that goes on. And then in the end of the game, the king and the pawn go in the same box. So what I'm saying is that there's a weight in the measure of the period and time in which is this all what we're calling life right now is going to transpire. You need to make the best of it. And I've always seen that the people that have come from the craziest sediment end up growing into the most beautiful, abundantly rich flowers. And that does become difficult to alchemize when you're thinking about the pain and the abuse. There is no excuse for this. It's okay with that. That's not what we're doing here. But what we're saying is that there is a power that is greater. That if you wanted to really heal from this, you would need to access that power because that's the power that heals those kind of things. And when you look in the world, they don't have that kind of power yet. They have a hard time healing people that have been through sexual traumas and those kind of things. They haven't unlocked that energy yet. So if you truly thought that you wanted to really do something for beings that have experienced this kind of thing, you would really unlock your Kundalini to heal them, not to kill more beings, to create only a repetition of the same thing and then to become infected with it by yourself. So you're not a killer, you're a healer. And those words are very similar, but in many ways they're different. So you have to learn that fine line. That's what I'm saying is discernment. You need laser. You need to raise Lazarus, or the tool that allows you to cut to where you don't hurt something, you heal it. It's like if I got to take a tumor off your brain, I can't cut too deep into your brain. You see what I mean? So you got to know how to move through this. And this kind of behavior, I want to kill them. I want to destroy them. And I felt that power and energy before, but I also felt its limitation. It's like being in the game and you need to score the final point, but you're so distracted. You're not in Zen, which is another name for Hermes, by the way, which is Zoroaster. You're not in Zen. You're in something else. And then you're not unlocked anyway. You're just rage. This is what will happen to you. And I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to myself. So just remember, if nobody's going to tell you what really should be done, maybe nobody will, because you're beyond reproach. Where are your parents? Are they going to be able to tell you how in which to carry your energy? So this is what you left me with to give to you, is just this awareness that, look, I've been through everything that you're talking about. I've slayed these beings before in the astral plane, chained down demons, sealed them with talismans, and watched them beat on the faceplate of what I've chained them in, only to find 7 years later them return and to wreak havoc on my life. And then realize that maybe I could have handled that a different way. And maybe those entities are in need of actually something too. And if I happen to be in a space to be able to communicate with them, maybe I would have been able to impart that on them with my power rather than destroy them with my power. Because that would have been the same thing as if I got introduced into another world and then my teacher or my guide said, finish him. He's not worthy of returning into existence. You see what I mean? So the same thing we get is the same thing we give is the same thing that we're going to get. And we need to really realize how much power that holds in our lives and how we make decisions every single day that really govern where we're going. So this somewhat of a final question is, ever since I've been doing yoga and meditating, I've gained access to 10 different parts of my brain, and I'm able to move them whenever. Would this have something to do with both sides of my brain being activated and anything to do with the crown chakra? I will tell you, when you activate 10 parts of your brain, truly, there's no more questions. You will know exactly what to do. So keep activating. Maybe it needs 20, maybe 30, but trust me on this, keep going. I'm not denying that there's no power here and that we haven't activated it yet. But what I'm saying is that activating, i.e. brain, starts to what I was saying today, let it bake. Let this bake. Even this answering questions right now, I'm going to skim through it fast. I want to make sure we clarify things, but I want you to figure this out from the code unpacking inside of your consciousness so you can see this from within, so you can start understanding that these powers that you're working with, it's to create an ultimate transmutation within who you are, and you're on that journey. And I'm here to encourage you on that journey, but you also need to have a check and balance system with yourself. They say, it's in the book of Jude. It's the shortest book in the Bible, in the New Testament, but it explains quite a bit. It also explains basically that there's got to be more books because something goes on inside of that particular 2 or 3 pages that's not written in anywhere else in the Bible. But it mentions in there that one has to make a sober estimate of themselves every day. You're responsible for doing this. So that way you don't imagine that you're more than you really are and thus forfeiting everything. Meaning that it's not great to say I've mastered something and you didn't master it yet, because this kind of would keep you from mastering it. It would be like me saying, I'm not an alcoholic, but I still drink. You see what I mean? So just be aware. I always practice this with myself. I stay open to that. I'm not complete because there's really no completions yet. My cup is just becoming more and more full. But remember, don't get to a point where you think that you've grasped this and then you're like, oh my goodness, like, is this it? Because you'll become discouraged. You'll be like, well, I turned on 90 levels of my brain and I'm still like over here, it's not happening yet. It's like, keep going with it and learn more and more about who you are in the feeling, right? So the next question here is, all truly is self. Letters, numbers, deities, all pointing us to picture, all pointing a picture to us. I hear often that we are gods, but then I'm reading texts that say the gods are in a separate realm. It's a paradox. You got a Biggie Smalls on your dimension right now. You live in a paradox, so you got to understand what they're saying when, yes, there is a world that is separate. This is 101. You need to go back to the introduction. You need to go to the karma codes. Yes, we are separate, just as like your kidney is not your liver or your spleen, but they're all working together. And in the event that one of them give up, man, even one of these little muscles that hold the neck, one of these little toes that are on the finger, not even a big toe, little toe goes out and you feel that every single day. So remember how, everything appears separate, but it's also working together, meaning that in the work, it's together. In the alchemy, all of the things are fused together in a formula. We're working together, right? So that's what's meant by it. But knowing the difference in energies or the gods is what's allowing you to join in on the fun. You don't just got to witness everything and witness how the creation is put together. You get a chance to be the creation and to create. So the next question is, does Aphrodite come from Kronos, father of time, and Saturn? What is the connection there? They show Kronos as like a bearded old white man in this case, and they show Aphrodite or Venus as a black woman. And they show these two getting together and creating a child. So in symbolism, what this means is that the poles again are being pulled together. Okay, so Kronos and Aphrodite is Saturn and Venus. And if you go into the karma codes, you'll see the relationship that Saturn and Venus really have together, where Aphrodite is free, right? This is where you're getting all of these things with even the pride movements and just the whole regalia and the whole way they act. That's that energy. That's the Aphrodite hermetic energy. And you can see when it gets to its extreme, you can see when it's in balance, you can see when it's in wisdom, and you can see when it's in foolishness, because as above, so below. So based on the perspective of where you're really at and how you're looking at the mysteries is how they're going to appear to you. And again, if they appear hostile, that means that it's like you're in this dimension and these things are bigger than you. Versus when they show you the Sumerians in all their glory, they're picking up lions like this. They're picking up Pazuzu and all the rest of the fearsome, great, all the chimeras and all that. They're picking them up by the cuff of their collar, because it's all about basically it's degrees. The same thing that becomes a challenge for you will become so easy for you once you raise in those degrees. So as we continue, closing down here, I see a lot of people are talking. I'm only going to questions as we get to the end. Why are there such parallels with Rahu and Mercury as silver in a liquid state, and a force of Rahu that bends metals, mutes energy? What is Rahu's connection with Kundalini? Is Rahu more of the weight-giving force, whereas liquid silver is light? Are they both different poles of the same bridge? We've always seen that, again, it's interesting because with Rahu and Ketu, we find that, as you see with the Ketu seems to be the body, Rahu seems to be the head. Rahu would kind of be lighter than the body, but at the end of the day, we also see that the Ketu character is also very dreamy, while Rahu seems to be very grounded into the physical realities. So what it says is simply pull off and see clearly that, yes, Rahu and Ketu correspond to this mercurial component and hermetic component, because it's in relation to the energy from the moon. And the moon is changing things based on the cycles of new moon to full moon, which actually switches the polarities. And of course, that controls why we have water moving in an ocean and a tide, and probably even determines how land is dry at times and able to be even inhabited versus everything being covered with water. So the next question is, we'll finish off in 10 minutes here. I heard that the modern gods are people operating a name as collecting the ties and energy off those who worship, i.e. corporation. Does this have any resonance? Whatever people give their money, their time, their energy to, mainly their energy, is what they're worshiping in that case and in that tense. So this act of basically sowing seeds is something that we're all doing. It's just a matter of making sure that you're sowing seeds on fertile ground. So yes, we have a bunch of people that are just, let's say, buying iPhones. So they've sowed a lot of seed into what Apple is. Same thing with IBM. I can't say they because I've used the IBM computer before. We gave a lot of time, energy, money to IBM, who's represented by Bill Gates. Now we've created a monster. It's so big, it's buying up everything, and it wants to poke and jab and all the different things that it's doing. But what empowered it? So yes, what we see is eidolons, as we call it, where others have fed energy into certain things, or we have fed energies into certain things, which is worship, and they've become very large, and they're starting to become uncontrollable or have become uncontrollable. This could be corporations, because the act of forming a corporation is the act of bringing something from death to life. It is the alchemical procedure. You start off with the entity, you raise the corpus, then you put together the building, and then you actually put together the framework and then the skeleton of the building, and then you inhabit it with life, which is the people, and then you breathe life into it, right? So that's how the corporations are alchemical treaties. So last question. Did Thoth the Atlantean reincarnate several times under different names, or was the influence so significant that he showed up in different cultures under different names? This is a very important thing to realize and to be aware of. Do you know how they tell you that the Spirit of God fills many things, right? And they oftentimes talk about how certain entities can control 20 people, 100 people, 1,000 people based on the power of that entity. So when we think about Thoth, think about the wisdom energy. What makes people smart, intelligent, creative, abundant, right? But now remember also that Thoth is a hermaphrodite, so it's not a man. It's a man and woman. So at its highest level, it's just trying to show you the alchemical properties within yourself. But in this layman's terms of how we would speak on it, we would understand that a person who becomes inspired by this force becomes Thoth. And you could have 20 Thoths on the planet, 200, 1,000, or 1. It's just about how many people are initiated into that mystery of themselves. So just to make that very clear, this energy is moving through the space. It is not what we would call a human only. It can feel the vessel. It's like the counselor that they talk about with the Holy Ghost. It fills the vessel. So it's some type of intelligence. It's seen to be serpent-like that would fill the person. That's why we're saying it's Kundalini rising. And so it's not just one person that it's filling. It's anyone who has the ability to unlock it within. Right? And so this last question, because it did pop in, it was slid under the door. What is the connection between the Bhagavad Gita and the Tibetan Book of the Dead? It would be one of those questions that I just really can't answer for you right now. Like, I shall return. No, because I have not looked into both of the scripts themselves and to see, what are the variables. Like I've read the Tibetan Book of the Dead versus the Bhagavad Gita. Like the Bhagavad Gita and the battlefield of Arjuna, as we've been reading, seems to be more of an account of how to maneuver on the physical plane versus the Tibetan Book of the Dead seems to be more about how to maneuver and get yourself prepared for what is to come. So that's what I would say just off the dome would be the difference between these works. Yeah? So this brings us to that miraculous point where we've completed today's build. It is 10:25, and we traveled a great distance. I know even sometimes this information could feel a little bit tiring. Let it bake. Let it soak in. Let it plant a seed, and then see what the results are in your own life, in your experiences. Because this type of level of awareness, as you start letting it basically, it's like it's unlocking something. It doesn't need you to comprehend it the way we comprehend things. It just needs to rest inside the subconscious, and the subconscious knows what to do. So today I felt like we had a very clear transmission of how these mysteries are all the same thing. And I trust that you'll be able to see within yourself the power. None of this, what I spoke about today, exists outside of you. These are not separate characters. These are opportunities and options that our ancestors paved the way for, went through the path on, really created a vibration of. And then we have this opportunity to tune in it. Now, not everybody tunes into this, clearly. How many of us is it? We're barely going over 100 as we keep going higher and higher. We have one more leg on the journey, and then we're just going to continue to produce greatness in our activities. But it was important for me to impart this knowledge and this awareness on you today about yourself. So Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations Tribe, thank you so much for riding this out the whole way. I'm going to go ahead and set the lines on unmute for that grand crescendo in just a second. I also just wanted to say to everyone that, wow, like, I'm just going to keep going. Like, I know what I am, so I know who you are, and that is more than enough. And while we're going through these experiences together, it's always great to just stay connected with yourself and stay grounded. Like, I always think of things to say before I close out these builds, but at times the energy builds so high, I even come out of these spaces like needing to ground. So I will recommend to all of us, go and take a bath, or go and sit down for a moment, lay on a pillow. If you got the mat, go and lay on the mat, but ground out the energy before you slingshot into something else, and then allow it to be a nourishment to you. Because every time I put myself into the gap to be able to gain this level of awareness, I always see something so unique come through. Man, it baffles me sometimes about just how truly amazing we are. Like, I don't really know where our amazingness ends. So to me, it doesn't. So thank you so much for everything. And yes, wholeness and balance. The lines are unmuted. Thank you.
Wholeness, brother. Give him thanks for that, brother.
Whew. So if you wanted to unmute yourself, you actually can unmute yourself and say wholeness tribe.
Wholeness.
Wholeness. Love you.
Wholeness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the space.
Wholeness supreme. Much love.
So much love, Wholeness Tribe.
Wholeness.
Thank you.
Feels like my skull is like barely holding tight.
Yo, we went through the Great Arcanum in like 2.5 hours. It took, I don't know how long it took them to inscribe those emerald tablets. Maybe overnight, maybe 1,000 years. But I know it took time to bring this level of wisdom and awareness into this world. And it also took those who were extremely inspired, not by what they see, but what this could become. And I want you to carry that with you. Sometimes it's not about what you see. I know we got crazy stuff going on around us, but man, stay in the flow and realize your power, because you're here to do some powerful things and to change things. And this is going to give you the ability to know more about yourself and how you came about that. So thank you so
having
much.
access to this, bro, is just, it's priceless.
Yo, it demystifies everything. Just let it bake in. If you're confused tonight, you didn't get your question answered, it's not making sense, you're still trying to figure out what is up with what, go again. And if you didn't start at the introduction and then the first degree, go through the process and let it work with you in that way, and all things will become clear. So thank you so much, family. Let's see you soon.
Thank you.